Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from March 14th to the 20th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. Then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready. And we're going to start with this news that we got on Friday from Rep. Nancy Mace out of South Carolina, as she introduced a resolution to deschedule cannabis at the UN with Rep. Barbara Lee, who's a Democrat. So good to see this bipartisan charge starting to take shape. And although this is new, hopefully we'll have some developments over the weeks that I'll be able to share. But good to see this call to action, as we need to shift perception on the international stage. Cannabis is not as dangerous as heroin, and the sooner our policies reflect this, the more lives will be saved. And while they do ask for the UN to start this effort, I do think it would be much more impactful if the US just took initiative, descheduled the plant themselves, and led this charge, as then the UN would follow, and most other countries would too. But if we look back at history, it was the American prohibitionist Harry J. Anslinger in 1961 that basically forced every other UN nation to comply with America's drug laws. Otherwise, he threatened to veto anything that those countries wanted to get done. So if the US wants to stay on top much longer, I think it's fair to say that one good way for them to go about this would be to take initiative on this and right their past wrongs so that they can be seen as a leader going forward in liberating this plant, as opposed to criminalizing it like they wrongfully did many, many years ago. And so on to this one from Forbes. More info that we already know, but yes, cannabis banking liberalization, Safe Banking Act would make the US more competitive. Obviously, that goes without saying. Now, I'm not going to go through this article because I've covered this many times in the past, but you can grab the link below. But not only would SAFE make America more competitive, it would also make it much safer. As I want to thank Sabatino for sharing this and putting it together, as everyday legal dispensaries are getting hit because of their lack of access to normal banking, forcing them to operate in cash. Simple as that. I'm ignorant, but this federal guy looks very intelligent, and you be the judge of it. Credit to Joe Griesler for the video and the link. So just want to post this one from Sabatino.
They're robbing something that's federally illegal.
They are, but what we're really concerned about is the violence associated with those robberies. They're not robbing it because it's in a marijuana business. They're robbing it because those businesses have a lot of cash on hand because of this tension between state law and federal law and the inability of those businesses to use our federal banking system.
Criminal.
Now, court documents released just a few minutes ago have identified the deceased suspect as Mauricio Martinez Yanez of Bellevue. The U.S. attorney is basically involved in these cases when there's an excess of guns and drugs, primarily trafficking guns and trafficking drugs. And a lot of this, he says, will change if Congress changes how they handle cash at these pot shops so they can actually use credit cards in the shop. Live.
So rest in peace, Mauricio. Another life lost way too soon because Chuck Schumer chooses to work for big pharmaceutical companies that pay him to delay the passage of SAFE, as opposed to working for the American people that voted for him. What a damned national tragedy that man is. On to this one from the Dales Report. So just want to share some good news though out of states, as nearly 200 licenses submitted to sell cannabis in New Jersey after they, I think, lifted that on Tuesday. So the timeline for recreational cannabis comes into focus. As of 4 p.m. Tuesday, exactly 172 licenses to sell legal cannabis were submitted to the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission. Nice. Tuesday is also the day when the New Jersey State Panel completed the review of applications from 8 out of the 12 alternative centers for treatment that sell medical cannabis and desire to expand their sales to the recreational market. From my understanding, those are the MSOs existing right now selling medical that want to get the head start on selling recreational, and the Commission anticipates it will be able to provide an update pertaining to application statuses by these 8 out of 12 alternative centers for treatment, or alternative treatment centers they call them, by the scheduling hearing on March 24th. And that's what we've been anticipating when they might announce that these alternative treatment centers could launch for adult use. So good to see this. And then on top of that, MJ Stock Trader shares this as this is the official agenda for the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission meeting on March 24th. A few reasons why I think we see rec sales approved: because there's no April meeting that is scheduled, and Governor Murphy said weeks, not months, a few weeks ago. And so that does line up with what we see as number 8 on the agenda, adult use cannabis, consideration for applications for a conditional license. And then we can also look at number 9B, consideration for expanded alternative treatment center certifications. And so either of those, I take that as a possible hint towards the fact that they are going to launch adult use sales on March 24th. And I think everyone's anticipating that, not only MD Stock Trader, but even Camilo at BTIG on New York. So thank you Todd, for sharing this one. He's saying, me, time to eat, kids, as New Jersey CRC agenda looks promising for adult use program. And just to add what Camilo puts into here, first, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission's CRC agenda for its next meeting on March 24th was just posted to its website, much like we just saw, with 9B, consideration of expanded alternative treatment center certifications, pointing to what we believe will be the expansion of medical alternative treatment centers, aka the MSOs, to begin selling recreational cannabis. If formally announced, we expect adult use sales would start 30 days thereafter. And so you can pause to read, otherwise you can grab the link below. But great update from Camilo. So obviously we're looking forward to March 24th next week. And then Todd Harrison also shares this as New York eyes pot stores leases in push for social equity. State explores real estate options as legal sales get closer. And New York's budget includes $200 million for diversity push. And so this is another Bloomberg article just talking about the developments in New York. So I'm not going to go through it, but you can grab this link below to grab it if you want. But just to highlight that New York budget includes $200 million for diversity push. All this to say that it looks like the ball is starting to get rolling in New York. And so wanted to provide this update from Marijuana Moment as well, as this is a very interesting precedent. New York lawmakers seek tax deductions for cannabis businesses in budget proposals despite federal ban. As New York legislative leaders have filed budget proposals that include language to let cannabis businesses take state tax deductions that are available to other industries despite an ongoing federal ban known as the discriminatory 280E tax. Both the Assembly and Senate budget measures that are expected to pass in advance of an April 1 deadline seek to carve out an exemption that would enable cannabis businesses to make the deductions as the state prepares to launch its adult use market. So I think this is great news. Now it's still early and I'll update as this goes, but then retailers could start opening as early as this year. So that's a new development. And so under 280E, if you're not aware of what it is, I would recommend reading this, but as I've covered this on the channel, I just want to stick to what's new. But as a result, some cannabis businesses pay effective tax rates of up to 80%, according to industry groups and accounting firms. And so to help resolve this issue, New York legislators in both chambers inserted language into their respective budget proposals stating that beginning this taxable year through January 1, 2025, the provisions of Section 280E of the Internal Revenue Code relating to expenditures in connection with the illegal sale of drugs shall not apply for the purposes of this chapter to the carrying on of any trade or business that is commercial cannabis activity by a licensee. So we do love to see this, as it seems like state lawmakers have been listening to the MSOs in the state and are annoyed with the federal discrepancy as well, so they're taking steps to try and remove this. However, obviously we'd love to just see cannabis descheduled, which would remove 280E, or see SAFE plus some version that includes removal of 280E. But otherwise, if we're not going to get this, it is good to see some state lawmakers taking initiative, and we'll see how this develops over time. While Cannabis Business Times reports that an Illinois judge lifts an injunction and allows the state to issue 60 craft grow licenses. And so while there's been a lot of delays in Illinois, it's great to see them start to make some progress on what they've already started on, because this state could be a major growth driver, as an Illinois judge has lifted an injunction that has barred state officials from issuing 60 craft grow licenses in the state's adult use cannabis program. As on March 14th, Sangamon County Judge Gail Knoll restored the applications of 11 unsuccessful applicants who had sued the state to challenge its decision to disqualify them, according to the Chicago Tribune. Seems like they took a page out of Georgia's book, or Georgia probably took a page out of Illinois', as the Illinois Supreme Court denied 1837 Craft Grow's request. But now that Knoll has lifted the injunction, the state is expected to reconsider the disqualified applications, rank all applicants, and ultimately determine who qualifies for a license, the Chicago Tribune reported. And so it seems like things can get moving again, but just a major update on the overall Illinois market is, meanwhile, 185 adult use cannabis dispensary licenses are held up by separate court orders, unfortunately, due to litigation challenging the application scoring process. While the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation announced this week that it is working to simplify the cannabis retail licensing process with a new set of rules, or set of new rules, so that will make it easier to apply. And lastly, an application window for 50 additional adult use dispensary licenses is expected to open during late summer or early fall. Why wait so long? This is so frustrating, but nonetheless, depending on what regulations are finalized. So hopefully we'll see something pick up sooner than later in Illinois, but just wanted to share that, as there is some slow progress. Is Illinois to accept applications for 55 additional retail cannabis stores? So this is a summary from Denis Rudev, so thank you, Denis, for sharing this. Currently, there's just 110 stores in Illinois 3 years after legalizing it. So that's why the growth is stalling a bit, and we've got 185 social equity retail licenses that are stuck held up in litigation. So essentially, these additional 55 retail licenses would bring the total to 350 stores, or one store for every 36 6,000 people. And for context, to properly supply the demand, you want to have at least one store per 10,000 residents per capita. And so Illinois has a lot of room for growth and improvement once they get past these litigation issues. But just to compare with Ontario, where I live, we've got a population of 14.5 million in Canada, while Illinois has a population of 12.7 million. And we've got over 1,100 stores now open compared to their, 295 without those 55 additional retail licenses. So we've seen that growth in Canada, mainly due to Ontario opening more stores. And so this will obviously be a massive growth driver once they can get past this hurdle. Onto this one from MJ Biz Daily, looking at Massachusetts, as Massachusetts banks are increasingly eyeing high growth cannabis industry. And so we love to hear this out of more cannabis friendly states. While some banks still shy away from cannabis, others increasingly are embracing the industry, as evidenced by a couple of recent examples in Massachusetts' booming cannabis market. As Needham Bank recently agreed to acquire the cannabis banking operations of Eastern Bank with plans to open a branch focused on cannabis businesses. Clearly, they're looking forward, where Eastern Bank is a little afraid to do that, while Needham Savings Bank is following suit, saying it has launched a cannabis banking business in acknowledgement of the industry's rapid growth and the need to access financial resources and services, according to Banker and Tradesman. And so all in all, about a dozen Massachusetts banks and credit unions now offer financial services to cannabis businesses, the Real Estate and Finance publication reported. And good on them, because I imagine in a decade's time, there's going to be a dozen Massachusetts banks and credit unions that are very happy they took initiative and started working with legal cannabis businesses in a legal state, and they didn't worry too much about the federal overhang. And so onto this one out of California, another very interesting precedent, as California might legalize interstate cannabis sales. And this comes from a law firm, I believe, Harrison Bricken. And so this is the first we're hearing of it, but I do want to share it because this obviously conflicts with federal laws and could mean a lot more that might be happening behind the scenes. So a few weeks ago, California lawmakers quietly introduced SB 1326, a bill that would amend the Medicinal and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act to legalize interstate cannabis sales, notwithstanding the status of federal law. Specifically, SB 1326 would authorize the governor to enter into an agreement with other states authorizing medicinal and adult use commercial cannabis activity, or both, between entities licensed under the laws of the other states and California entities operating with a state license. So very interesting. If enacted in its current version, the bill would also, 1, limit interstate commercial cannabis activities to out-of-state operators that secure a state license or a local license, permit, or other authorization issued by the local jurisdiction. So from my understanding, this is just anyone in other states that already have a license can play ball versus people that need to apply for a new one. Number 2, require that the other states impose requirements, including product safety, labeling, and testing requirements on their cannabis licensees that meet or exceed the requirements applicable to MAU-CRSA licensees. And 3, lastly, mandate that the agreement include provisions for collection of applicable taxes, because of course California will want their cut. And so there's no doubt that if enacted, SB 1326 would further legitimize the idea of cannabis interstate commerce and would likely influence other states to follow the footsteps of the Golden and Beaver states, which have been and continue to be cannabis mavericks. And so needless to say, we'll keep closely monitoring this issue and report on any legislative development. And so I still think interstate commerce is far out, but I do wonder if the lack of action in Congress is forcing state lawmakers to take initiative in writing some things like this in order to try and force their hand. And so we'll see what happens in time. Well, MJ Biz Daily reports that Kentucky House passes a medical cannabis bill and the Senate vote is next. And this is surprising out of Kentucky, a state that basically anything that happens in there has to go through Mitch McConnell. And if this actually has a chance of surviving, it means McConnell has to okay it, I'm pretty sure. So the Kentucky House of Representatives passed a restrictive medical cannabis bill by a vote of 59 to 34. And the measure, approved Thursday, now goes to the Republican-controlled Senate, where passage is less certain. So we'll see probably how Mitch McConnell feels about this, whether it makes it through the Republican-controlled Senate or not. And so just wanted to share this one from Indianapolis, WRTV, as they just share an article as tax revenue from cannabis sales benefits communities across the U.S. And so I just see this as a funny plea of Indianapolis sharing to their residents, why are other states so rich? Probably because they've all legalized cannabis. And so if you go through this, you just see Colorado, Washington, $10.4 billion nationwide. Colorado legalized, $400 million in tax revenue. New York legalized, $1.3 billion in sales, between 19,000 to 24,000 jobs. So I just think it's funny and wanted to share this, as other states that have not taken initiative are simply wondering, why are other states so far ahead of us? Gosh, I wonder if you ended prohibition, you might see why. And on to this one from Office of Medical Cannabis Use out of the state of Florida, looking for this past week, from March 14th to the 18th, we can see that Verano opened 2 new locations, Alt-Mid Florida in Brandon and Alt-Mid Florida in Tampa. while Sunnyside opened a new location in Lady Lake and True Leaf opened a new location in Boca Raton, Florida. If we take a look at the qualified patient count for this past week, we can see that they increased their qualified patient count to 695,986, which represents a total week-over-week increase of 3,605. So the growth is steady and continuing, which we love to see. And if we look at dispensations from March 11th to the 17th, we can see all the MSOs that operate in the state, and we can see the number of milligrams of THC sold, milligrams of CBD sold, and ounces of smokable flower sold. So if you're invested in any MSO, you can check week over week whether they've increased or decreased their market share and see how they're competing and keeping market share in this very competitive state. But this is an easier visual to look at it from Pierre Gilles. So thank you, Pierre, for updating this, as I wanted to add it in for you guys to take a look at. Florida flower market share comp sheet with the top 8. So thank you, Pierre, for taking that week over week data and plugging it into a spreadsheet for us so we can easily see who is leading the way and what changes are happening month over month. On to some MSO news as Cresco Labs expands brand portfolio to Florida, launching expansive product lineup in March. As today, or March 17th, they announced the launch of its high supply, Good News, and Remedy brands in Florida. In addition, the company released a new edibles brand, Sunnyside Chews, available only in the state, and Cresco Labs will soon expand to Florida its premium craft quality flower brand Floral Farms from California, and best-selling flagship brand Cresco. So good to see as they continue to expand in some of the new markets that they've recently brought on. While also got this news out of the Westchester and Fairfield County Business Journals as cannabis facility receives approval. Great. For who? The planning board in the town of Wawarsing in Ulster County has approved plans for Valley Agroceuticals LLC, whose parent company is Cresco Labs, to build a 380,000 square foot cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution facility. Nice. The Business Journal was advised that passage of the approval resolution means that the developer can move forward with the building project. And from my understanding, where we're seeing in Ulster County is in New York State, so this is a great way for Cresco to prepare for the wholesale distribution that is going to start later this year with those first social equity licenses. And it's been estimated that the facility would have 300 to 400 employees providing jobs once fully operational, and that it would represent an investment of more than $50 million made by Cresco Labs of capital expenditures into this one facility to supply New York with wholesale distribution for the coming decade. I'd say that's a pretty good use of your capital. And so on to this one from Verano, as Verano opening first West Virginia medical cannabis dispensary, Zen Leaf Morgantown. And so good to see them expanding into some of the lesser competitive states like West Virginia that we know True Leaf is in, as Zen Leaf Morgantown marks the company's first dispensary in West Virginia, a medical cannabis market projected to record sales as high as $40 million by 2025, according to MJ Biz Daily, so a much smaller market than some of the many other competitive ones. While Verano's inaugural West Virginia dispensary opening expands the company's active operational footprint to 13 states and 92 dispensaries nationwide, implementing existing operations in neighboring states that include Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Ohio, as Zen Leaf Morgantown is located at Cheat Road and Venture Drive, a highly traveled intersection that sees an average of 28,000 vehicles per day near West Virginia University's main campus and a population of more than 26,000 students. While I doubt a majority of those students will be of legal age in order to purchase cannabis, it does show that, like in the past, Verano seems to do a lot of research into where they're opening new dispensaries, whether it's in a competitive state or less competitive state, ensuring that there's going to be a lot of foot traffic, car traffic, or both in towards the location. And so into some other news from Marijuana Moment, as federal cannabis cases continue to decline with fewer than 1,000 cannabis charges in 2021, because no one should be in jail for a plant at this point. Federal prosecutions over cannabis dropped again in 2021, with fewer than 1,000 people charged in cannabis trafficking cases. Yet another sign that the plant is becoming a lower enforcement priority as the legalization movement scores wins in more states. There were 996 federal cannabis trafficking cases last year, according to an analysis from the Federal U.S. Sentencing Commission. And again, this is trafficking, so if you're still catching people trafficking illegal product, go for it and charge them. They should not be allowed to do that. But at the same time, it's just when we stop with this double standard, things get a lot better for everybody, as those cannabis busts account for 5.7% of the total drug-related cases that went through the federal justice system in fiscal year 2021, while in contrast, USCC reported that there were more than 7,000 federal cannabis cases in 2012, the year when voters in 2 states approved adult use legalization initiatives at the ballot. And so at that point, cannabis topped the list of drugs that were involved in federal cases, and now cannabis is at the bottom of the list. But I'm very happy to relay this as we move out of the prohibitionist era, and as we do, I'm very happy to see that less and less people's lives are ruined by outdated laws that should have never been set in the first place. Well, we've got this one from the Wall Street Journal as Free Brittney. I thought that was for Britney Spears at first. A campaign to release Brittney Griner fills the silence. As the WNBA star's legal case in Russia applauds, a push to secure her release is beginning in the US. And so, while this sounds like a nice effort, as it could be a starting point for Biden to start talking with Putin to potentially change the outdated drug laws and negotiate her release, the reality is, I think Putin's completely in control in this situation, and sadly, Biden is not the leader that we thought he could be. And in reality, Biden's shown that he's pretty racist in the fact that he did not change things when Sha'Carri Richardson was banned for competing, even though she tested for cannabis. And sadly, Brittney Griner is black, and based on Biden's past racist history, I really don't think he's going to take initiative. Now, I do hope I'm wrong and that we get pleasantly surprised. That would be great. But where we stand right now, sorry, social justice warriors, but Biden is not the hero that you thought he was. And so lastly, onto this one from Mugglehead Magazine, as politicians across parties propose a 5-year cannabis pilot in Denmark, as the program would allow domestic production and state-controlled retail. As according to the submitted documentation, that bill will look like one put forth in Copenhagen with sales at state-controlled outlets, and it's legal for citizens to buy, possess, grow, and consume cannabis for personal use. The proposed scheme would set up public outlets in municipalities wishing to join the program. Production would be legalized and take place domestically in Denmark. Retailers would be run by trained staff who are knowledgeable about cannabis, including related risks and treatment options, while pricing would be set up to meet the expectations of people who use cannabis products and are competitive with the illicit market. And buyers must be at least 18 years old and be a resident of the country. So good job, Denmark, for taking initiative, as other European countries are doing it as well. Good to see more take the lead. And then lastly, just wanted to share this tweet from Jason Wild in replying to Tim Seymour, as Tim says, "Caution to my cannabis friends, despite being a committed investor to the space, as you know, the world had a momentum rally this week off sentiment through COVID lows. Cannabis stocks 10 to 30% this week, increased 10 to 30% this week. Unless you believe global markets bottom this week, I don't." He's basically just saying be careful. But I wanted to share this from Jason G. Wild, who is the executive chairman of TerraSend. I guarantee you that the next 110% move is up, not down. So just wanted to end that off because I'm sure Jason Wild knows a lot more than I do. And if he's got the confidence to say that, I think that the outlook going forward is a lot brighter than it had been in the last 13 months. And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great week, everybody.